former Democratic presidential nominee and Vice President of the United States, also, of course, Democratic Senator Kamala Harris's book. It's called 107 Days, is out today. So Kamala Harris is on a media tour. She's been on Rachel Maddow's show. She's been on The View. And we have some clips and a breakdown coming up of all of the highlights, lowlights from Kamala Harris's recent media appearances and reviews of the book as well. So before we dive into these clips, just remember Undercurrents.tv, that's where you can go to get a premium subscription of the show. Thank you all so much for supporting us. You get full interviews over there, full versions of our interviews over there. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you haven't joined us with a subscription over there, it helps so much. We appreciate it. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at Kamala Harris's interviews with Rachel Maddow and on The View.
You know, you're the first woman elected vice president. You're a black woman and a South Asian woman elected to that high office, very nearly elected president. To say that he couldn't be on the ticket effectively because he was gay is hard to hear.
No. That's not what I said, that he couldn't be on the ticket because he is gay. My point, as I write in the book, is that I was clear that in 107 days, in one of the most hotly contested elections for President of the United States, against someone like Donald Trump who knows no floor, to be a black woman running for President of the United States and as a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the stakes being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk.
What was the primary reason, do you think, that you lost?
There are many factors, I think, that played into the outcome of that election. But I think probably one of the biggest in my mind is we just didn't have enough time.
You didn't have enough time.
We didn't have enough time.
Oh, yeah. Well, you didn't.
And, you know, I mean, one of the reasons I wrote the book is this is unprecedented. Think about this.
Yeah.
That there's a race for president of the United States. The current sitting president is running for re-election. 3.5 months from the election, he decides not to run. The sitting vice president then takes the mantle, running against a former president of the United States who had been running for 10 years with 107 days until the election.
Okay, so in both of these instances, we actually have some data to undermine the cope that Kamala Harris is selling or trying to sell along with her book, actually really as a part of the book. So first, let's take this question of whether or not it was really a risk to add Pete Buttigieg to the presidential ticket rather than your kind of standard straight white boomer liberal Tim Walz. Kamala Harris says in this book, Pete Buttigieg was her first choice, as she expounds upon with Maddow. But, of course, talks about the risks of tacking on a gay candidate to the ticket alongside a woman who is black and, as Harris puts it, married to a Jewish man. So you're kind of combining all of these different minorities in one presidential ticket and women, of course, in one presidential ticket. And she felt if you added a gay man to the vice presidential side, it would just be too much. Now, polling is pretty clear that basically only on the margins does a vice presidential pick hurt or help a presidential candidate. So there's already that to contend with. And polling also shows, I mean, I guess we don't really need polling because Barack Obama was the president of the United States. But of course, America is still supportive of having a black president. America's actually also supportive to the tune of about 58% of having a gay president. So UCLA's Williams Institute does a lot of polling on LGBT issues, and they found actually back in 2019 that, quote, over half of all respondents said that the fact that a presidential candidate was transgender would not matter to them. That's 46%, or it would make them more likely to support a candidate. That's 11%. Only 1 in 4 said they would be, quote, much less likely to vote for a transgender candidate. Now, what about a gay candidate? So someone like Pete Buttigieg. 58% of respondents said that they would either be more likely to support such a candidate or that identity would not matter to their vote at 48%. So 10% said it makes them more likely, 48% says it wouldn't matter at all. This is really similar numbers to when the Williams Institute asked about, in this Reuters Ipsos poll, looked at whether or not someone would be more likely to vote for a transgender candidate. Again, this is back in 2019. So take all of this together. Do people vote on a vice presidential candidate? Are people bothered by the idea of having a gay or even transgender vice presidential candidate on a ticket with a black female candidate? I'm actually even just going to set aside Kamala Harris's claim that it would somehow be salient to voters' decision that she was married to a Jewish man. I just don't think there's any evidence to suggest that's true. The best argument for her position here is that this would be a really close election, and even risking losing people here and there could actually be the thing that tips the scale in one direction or the other at what she saw as a sort of crucial hinge moment in electoral politics. Now, on the other hand, let's take these results from the Reuters Ipsos poll in the Williams Institute article that we're looking at here. You have people saying that they would be more likely to vote for a ticket if there was a gay candidate on it. So to the extent that anybody was even voting on a vice presidential candidate, it would be just marginal, but also probably then overcompensated or compensated by a number of people who are more likely, who may have not stayed home, which, by the way, was a problem for Democrats, just a lack of voter enthusiasm for Kamala Harris as opposed to some other candidate. Do you actually end up tipping the scale back in that direction because people want to support the idea of a gay vice president on the left? It might actually even out. But all of this is talking about such a small number of people that, Pete Buttigieg's response here, he said, basically, let me find this quote from him. "My experience in politics has been that the way you earn trust with voters is based mostly on what they think you're going to do for their lives, not on categories." So I think he's broadly right. I think that's a shrewd, clever response from Pete Buttigieg that suggests he has more political acumen than Kamala Harris, who finds herself face-to-face with Rachel Maddow, trying to defend what is pretty obviously just a cynical political strategy while also defending herself as this sort of brave ideological warrior for the left. And she wants those two things to be compatible in the way that the public sees her. But in doing so, she's painting a darker picture of America by her own terms than actually exists. And it shows why she's also wrong in her cope on The View, because actually I went back and looked at this because the conservative news site Town Hall pointed it out. They said the longer Kamala Harris was the nominee, the less popular she got. So I remembered and went back and looked here at Real Clear Politics' favorable, unfavorable ratings over the course of Kamala Harris's time as vice president, all the way up until today. And it's true. I mean, while Kamala Harris was vice president, after, by the way, not making it to the Iowa caucuses. This is a woman who launched her campaign with money and media excitement. Such a splashy start to her 2020 presidential campaign, and did not even make it into 2020. I believe she dropped out in December of 2019. Again, right before the Iowa caucuses even happened. This woman was wildly unpopular as vice president, like historic levels of unpopularity or unfavorability, depending on how you're measuring it, as vice president of the United States. Now, after Joe Biden passes the torch to Kamala Harris, there really was a sugar high. We were at the DNC for Undercurrents covering the obvious momentum that Kamala Harris had at the time. And it's true, her numbers with the public, her unfavorability rating plummeted, her favorability rating jumped. That lasted literally until mid-September. So it wasn't long for Kamala Harris to have this brief moment where she had a favorability number that was higher than her unfavorability after years, literally years of the opposite. That changed about 6 months into her time as vice president, and never went back except for literally a few weeks after Joe Biden passed the torch onto her. Now Kamala Harris's unfavorable and favorable is back to where they were when she was vice president. And yet you see over The View this sort of nodding reaction to Kamala Harris when she says she didn't have enough time to sell herself. Again, this is somebody who had all of the time and arguably plenty of money to run for the presidential nomination in 2020 and did not even make it to Iowa. This is somebody who had all the time in the world in front of her as vice president, which, by the way, was no easy feat, but she was underwater compared to Joe Biden. It's no easy feat to be Joe Biden's vice president, that's for sure. But she had all the time in the world during that term to improve her numbers. They went down and stayed down. She has this brief honeymoon period, and ever since, her numbers have gone down. And it's true, by election day, her unfavorables, according to RCP, were higher than her favorables, and the trend was going in the wrong direction and has opened up to where it is today. The numbers as of January 19th, 2025, are plus 11 unfavorable. That's how far underwater Kamala Harris is. Again, that's as of January. I've seen other numbers that show right now she's suffering the same sort of fate as she tries to sell this book. Now, politician books are to try and, do they sell a lot of copies? Yes, a lot of that is because they go and do public speaking and they do events. Harry Enton on CNN was talking earlier today about how Kamala Harris right now, we said negative 11, the RCP favorabilities as of January. Right now, Harry Enton has those numbers over at CNN at minus 13 points. So minus 11 in January, minus 13. Again, not a good trend for Kamala Harris here as she tries to sell the book. But the audience for a book like this tends to be, let's say, elites, historians, journalists, and, the books sometimes sell as Christmas presents. That's why you get them out in the fall. People who maybe still are big Kamala Harris fans or big Dems or political, they're known in their family as political people, they'll get a copy of the book for Christmas and it'll sell okay. It probably won't sell okay compared with other presidential or vice presidential or candidate memoirs. But I mean, we'll see. Either way, she's not, trying to completely be the new Michelle Obama. I would imagine her publishers have no expectations of her book selling like the Michelle Obama memoir did not that long ago, or by the way, the Prince Harry memoir did not all that long ago either. So this is to sell for speaking engagements and to kind of write history in a favorable direction, nudge history in a favorable direction. And it's really wild to see people like Rachel Maddow and The View continuing to give Kamala Harris a pretty favorable platform to sell this book, but also more importantly, to sell this revisionist history that is obviously flatly untrue. And yes, Rachel Maddow challenged her. The View asked some questions going in one direction or the other, because that speaks to how I think deeply skeptical Democrats are of their own strategy. You can go back and watch that remarkable Pod Save America autopsy of the Harris campaign, where her campaign manager and other strategists were grilled by the Pod Save America guys from Obama world, of all people, about the failed strategy in that election. And it went very poorly and exposed a lot of incredible flaws in the Harris campaign strategy that they tried to then polish and put in this Harris campaign memoir, 107 Days. And even with all of the time and thought that went into that, they are not selling anything more persuasive or more convincing. Kamala Harris is the exact same fence-sitting politician who can't quite go all in and tell the truth that she wants to about Joe Biden and why he decided to stay on the ticket, why she continued to, let's face it, mislead, at best, the American public about Joe Biden's condition. She can't be honest. And that is a sort of stark contrast with where candidates are going. She, well, I'll remember, famously did call her daddy on the campaign trail. Just a weird decision when you're trying to run like a 1990s politician in the 2024 election. You either have to sort of stay in one lane or go all the way into the other and truly sit down for 3 hours or whatever with Joe Rogan. If you're going to do this like weird, almost robotic appearance on a podcast, you're probably better off just not doing the podcast because it makes you look exactly like what young women or just young voters in general are turned off by, voters in general are turned off by, opens you up to all kinds of mockery and memery, and not in the coconut tree meme kind of way. That was during the honeymoon phase. Coconut memes, I'll give them that. Those are pretty good. But she really was running a 1990s campaign and trying it in 2024, which Joe Biden did, by the way, in 2020. But he was able to pull off barely over Trump. And that's where it's always with Trump a close election, because it's a lesser of two evils election for a really crucial demographic of swing voters in those states. And you're not helping yourself by trying to fit into the 2024 box when you're really in a like 1996 box. You just, at this point, these sort of politicians who find themselves in the middle probably need to choose one path or the other. But going forward, I don't know that there is going to be a path for a 1996 candidate. And this is obviously true when you look at how Pete Buttigieg has courted the podcaster ecosystem. So he's gone on with Andrew Schultz and others. Democrats are now sort of dipping their toes in those waters more. Buttigieg went on with Tim Miller over at The Bulwark, who we've, of course, had on here. And he's aware that there has to at least be a concession that 1996 politics is gone, and you can't just sort of dabble in 2024 politics. You can't dabble in new media politics. It has to be totally different. And what that means is you have to be convincing off the cuff. You have to be sort of, listen, none of these people are authentic. Some people are more authentic than others. That's probably the best way to put it. And you can tell some people generally are actually not speaking without a script. I'm not saying Buttigieg is great at that. He's definitely better than Kamala Harris. But this is where, whether you like J.D. Vance or don't like J.D. Vance, he went and sat down with Theo Vaughn and took some really tough questions that Theo Vaughn ultimately was unsatisfied with. But Vance did it. Thomas Massie did it. And that's what people increasingly expect. That's why you see news outlets, for example, releasing transcripts of their interviews instead of just those old school 60 Minutes packages. And Kamala Harris, who, by the way, got exposed by 60 Minutes releasing a full transcript of one of her interviews, sort of the perfect illustration of this. She is not a politician for this moment, and she hasn't learned how to be, even with a year to reflect. And actually also with now, 5 years to reflect on why she didn't win in the 2020 primary. I shouldn't even say win. She didn't even compete really in the 2020 primary ultimately because she dropped out before Iowa. So these are some thoughts on how Kamala Harris is just not adapting and probably will not adapt, despite the fact that she has further ambitions because she's trying to polish and burnish her reputation as we head into the next cycle. What role she runs for next, unclear, but I would say expect to see more of her, and it's a pretty clear sign that she's not going to be a new and improved version of Kamala Harris that people take more seriously and see as a more authentic voice. Thank you so much for tuning in. As a reminder, subscribe on undercurrents.tv for the full versions of our interviews. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, over at the Undercurrents YouTube channel, where we're so close to 100,000 subscribers. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back with more soon.